Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here today. I'm Allison Boyer, Director of the Center for Teaching and Learning. I think most of you all probably know me at this point in some form or fashion, but I'm really excited for you all to be here today and listen to this great discussion I know we're going to have about academic integrity. And what do you do when you realize that you have a student or students who are violating policies of academic integrity? We have a really incredible panel for you today who are going to share their expertise on the matter and their ideas. And we have somebody from the Dean of Students office, an associate dean, as well as a professor. So we've got a great range of experiences and knowledge here today. And my plan for the hour is we will have some discussion. Our panelists will share some ideas for the first 45 minutes or so to 50 minutes, and then we will have time for questions from attendees at the end. So at that, I will turn it over to our panelists to introduce themselves. Melody, would you like to start us off?
Hi, everybody, and thanks for coming to the Zoom. My name is Melody Miyamoto Walters. This is my 12th year at Collin. I teach history. I'm at the technical campus now. Prior to this, I was at the McKinney campus, and I've taught face-to-face classes, hybrid classes, honors classes, dual credit classes, and Gen Pop classes. So I've covered quite a range by this point.
Sounds like you've done it all. And Rachel?
I'm Rachel Bzostek Walker. I'm the Associate Dean of Academic Affairs at the Technical Campus. I've been in this position since January. This is my 6th year at Collin, and prior to moving to the Technical Campus, I taught government at the Frisco campus. I taught, like Melody, I taught online, hybrid, dual credit, general population, you name it. I've seen all of the students as well from a faculty perspective, and now I also see it from the Associate Dean's perspective.
That's great, thank you. And Amy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here. I'm Amy Throop, and I am the Associate Dean of Students and Deputy Title IX Coordinator actually for the entire district. I just moved over to the Technical Campus last Monday from the McKinney campus, and I have been in this position since 2009, so quite a long while now. And I've actually been with the college since 2002. So I'd like to see, I've seen it all, but I tell you what, every week there's something else that pops up and I'm like, they did it again, it's a new one. So we'll talk about some of those things today, I'm sure.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, so we've got some really great experienced panelists, but as Amy said, I'm sure our students will never cease to amaze us. So I'd like to just kind of get us started thinking about what we consider cheating or violations of academic integrity to begin with. We might have an understanding of the big broad definitions, but maybe there are some other things that we want to keep in mind. So how do you and how does the college writ large generally and officially define cheating, plagiarism, or other violations of academic integrity? And you all can speak in whatever order you want to.
I'll start. For me, I go according to the policy that's set on the syllabus, primarily because it's auto-generated on the syllabi on the format. So there's no question about how to do that. So I stick with that, but I also have an original use policy. So I tell the students, even if it's their own work, but if they've submitted for another class before, then they can't submit it again. So what I see mostly is plagiarism in my classes. Every once in a while, I'll see cheating on exams, but that's not too common. Especially with COVID, I've switched to more online exams where I'm looking for more critical thinking than memorization. I teach history. It's important to know what happened in 1776, but it's more important to know why it happened, especially with Google these days. So they get to use their notebooks, they get to use their textbooks and websites when they do their exams, as well as their papers. But what I found more recently, and Amy knows all about this, is that students are cheating more on the exams. Last year, we had twins. Amy, you remember that one? Where they turned in very similar answers to a subjective question in the exam. The answer was wrong. So, that's a red flag to begin with, but it was so similar that I submitted them. And the defense to Amy was that they're twins. And because they're twins, they're kind of telepathic and they think alike. And so that they didn't cheat, they just think the same way. And then this year, mostly I've been dealing with plagiarism. And so we talk about that. At the beginning of the semester, I give them all kinds of scenarios of excuses that I've had from students before. One of my favorites is one of my students, when I was at a different institution, came up to me after I had flagged her paper for plagiarism, particularly because in her footnote, it said, "See my other work." And then there was a title of a book that was her other work. And I tell my students that that student came in to talk to me in tears, and she was crying and saying how she just found out she was pregnant and her grandma and her grandpa were both in the hospital and she didn't have any other choice. And at that point, I always tell my students, what would you do if you were me? Some of them laugh and say, she's making it all up. And some of them say, oh, I feel so sorry for her. And I tell them, it doesn't matter how you feel, because if they violated the policy here at Collin, all I need to do is pass it on to Dean Throop, and she's the one who's going to take care of it. So that's how I deal with the original case to begin with.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other other things you want to add to that definition, or other things to consider?
Sure. So I can tell you from our perspective, when we get a case, we are looking at a couple different things. We're looking at the board policies and the specific board policy that goes with scholastic dishonesty, which is not very prescriptive when it comes to scholastic dishonesty, but that's FLB local. So we're looking at that. Then we're looking at the definitions that we have in our student code of conduct. And I'm not going to read those to you guys because they get longer and longer every year. But if you have not looked at this year's student handbook and specifically the code of conduct, I encourage you to do so. Scholastic dishonesty is listed on page 138 in the current student handbook. And so right now we are recognizing 3 categories of scholastic dishonesty here at Collin: cheating, collusion, and plagiarism. If you go out there, like I said, the definitions get longer and longer every year. So I do encourage you to read through those. So we're looking at the board policy. We're looking at the scholastic dishonesty policy in the student code of conduct and those definitions. And then we're also looking through the professor's syllabus to see if they do have a clause, like Melody just mentioned, about being able to reuse previous work or what their exam instructions look like. So it's really important when you all submit a case to our office that you send us any instructions that you have provided to the students for that particular exam or that particular assignment. If you have instructions that are in your syllabus, go ahead and send us that syllabus as well. If you post announcements in Canvas, send us those types of things. If you're using HonorLock and you have specific settings in HonorLock, you can take a screenshot of those and send us the screenshot of the settings as well. So we're looking at all of that. And then what we do is we look at the preponderance of the evidence. So think of it as 50% plus a feather. So when we're deciding whether or not a student violated the code of conduct for an allegation of scholastic dishonesty, is it 50% plus a feather, more likely that it happened or more likely that it did not? So those are some of the factors that we're taking into account when we look at a case. And then of course, we also hear from the students as well and get their perspective on the matter.
Just building on what Amy said, I can't stress enough from your associate dean's perspective, be really clear in your syllabus, what you think is important, right? The part at the bottom, the institutional elements are going to self-populate and those are going to be there. The students are never going to read that far down, to be honest. I mean, they're not going to know that that's there. But if there's something that you think is really important, like the original use part that Melody has in her syllabus is fantastic. And that's great. But if there's something that's really, really important to you, make sure you clearly articulate that in your syllabus. Because when a student complains, I had a meeting with, we're primarily dual credit here at Allen in academic affairs. And I had a meeting about 10 days ago with a student and her parent and a professor. And the student was very upset, or the parent, not the student, the parent was very upset with the decision that Amy made. And the parent thinks that Amy decided unfairly and was overly harsh against the student. And I was able to show that not only did the institutional guidelines talk about plagiarism, but the professor also talked about it. And the professor said, this is what plagiarism is, and these are the consequences of plagiarism, in the syllabus. And so I'm sure we'll talk about this several times as we go on, but just be explicit in your syllabus, and be explicit multiple times in your syllabus. It's probably like when you were in grad school and people said, if you say it once, it's not enough. Say it twice, say it 3 times. And then your students will hopefully start to understand this. These are your expectations.
And just to add on to that, I would also say not only be explicit in your syllabus, but be explicit in your assignment instructions. If you have said in your syllabus that you require them to use Chicago style citations, reiterate that on each of your assignments that require writing of any type, and reiterate what the consequences are. Yeah, it's going to make those assignments longer, but like Rachel just said, when we have a complaint, we have multiple places that it's documented that right up front, you told them, these are my expectations and my requirements.
Clarity and transparency are always good pieces of advice. Amy, you brought up the student code of conduct, and I wonder if you or Rachel or Melody as well, how familiar are students with the code of conduct? Like, how are they?
They're not.
How much do they engage with it, I guess, is what I'm asking.
They don't. The vast majority of them that end up in my office, and of course, extrapolating, the vast majority of them do not know that that document exists. Or if they do, it's because they were looking for a specific piece of information, not necessarily even related to scholastic dishonesty. A lot of them will go out there looking for policies on Title IX or discrimination or hazing or other things, and they'll find it that way. But for those that are brought in for scholastic dishonesty, very, very few of them know that that document exists, despite the fact that we talk about it multiple times during orientations and the faculty talk about it. They do not engage with that document.
Shocking.
Yes. Yes.
So on my first day of class, when I go over the syllabus, I specifically make sure I point out that my syllabus is like 14 pages long. It's crazy, but I'll make sure I stop at the part where it has a scholastic dishonesty policy, and we go over it, and I tell them about the different types of scholastic dishonesty. I tell them about the different issues that have come up. And then I tell them that I'm not going to worry about it until they give me reason to. But I also make really clear that I turn people in all the time. I tell them that the percentage number doesn't matter. It's more the violation that matters. For example, if I use turnitin.com, and if they turn in a paper that is an 86% match, but everything is in quotation marks and cited, that's not plagiarism. I tell them that's a really bad paper that won't pass, but that's not plagiarism. But let's say you have a 1% plagiarism or 1% match on turnitin.com. If you turn in a 100-page paper and 1 page is plagiarized, that's still just 1%. But if there's no citations and no credit, it's still plagiarism, and that's what gets turned in. So I always say, students complain that I turn them in. I tell them that Dean Throop is a student advocate, that she's on their side and she wants them to learn and do well. But I also say, if you violate the policy, I'm going to turn you in. And students complain, I should have got a warning. And I say, this is your warning now. This is it. You've been warned, so don't do it. But I make sure that they're aware of the policy. That is not just mine, but the colleges as well.
Well, and that's something else I think that when you talk to your students or tell your students, to remind them that Amy and everybody else in the Dean of Students office, they're a neutral third party in all of this, right? And they're very separate from the professors. Students tend to get very defensive, and they think that, you, the professor, are out to get them, or I, the person that they're complaining to, are out to get them. The whole world's out to get them, and we hate them. I've been told this a lot recently in the last couple of weeks. We just want them to fail, and that the Dean of Students office just wants them to fail also, and that you're in cahoots with, the faculty members who've turned them in. And I keep telling the students that the Dean of Students office is a completely neutral third party who has nothing vested in any of this, and that when Amy looks at, or Dean Throop looks at the process, you're looking at it as really an educational approach to it. And when I met with the student and her parent the other day, I told the student, I said, I'm sure that Associate Dean Throop told you something to the effect of, I don't want to see you in my office for something like this again. And this is how we make sure that this doesn't happen again. And she sat there kind of sheepishly like, yes, I'm not going to do this again. And so it's really a way to help students not go down the plagiarism road again, or not go down the cheating road again. And it's not to, a way to, I mean, there's a punishment involved, or a, some sort of, grade punishment or something like that, but you're not going to get kicked out of school once for it.
Right. And Rachel's absolutely correct. And this is an educational process for us. Even when students are sent to our office, we let them know right off the bat, yes, there is probably going to be a penalty of some type involved. However, this is an educational process. We want you to learn from any mistakes that you've made so that you don't commit them again in the future.
I had a student that followed me back to my office yesterday because she got the email from Amy saying that she needed to come in to meet with because of plagiarism. But the student wanted to know where the match was. It was a subjective question on the exam, so she hadn't run it through turnitin.com. It was just through Canvas, but it was iffy enough that I ran it through turnitin.com and I saw the match. So she followed me back. She asked me if she could see what the match was. And she was really worried about it. I showed it to her. I explained to her the process. And I kept on saying, this doesn't mean that you're going to fail the class or get kicked out of school. This means that Dean Throop is going to look into it to see if there's any cause for concern and to see if you need help with this. And at the end, she kept on saying, oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was the most appreciative person I've ever seen for being turned into plagiarism. But I think she was just really worried that she was going to get kicked out or something like that. And I tried to emphasize that this is not going to be that kind of case. It's that something went wrong. We need to figure out what it is and how to help you so that it doesn't happen in the future.
That's a really important thing to emphasize for students who might have that tendency to see everything as only punitive, right? So I wonder, let's maybe walk through the entire process with each of you. So maybe Melody, you could start us off and talk about, what are the first steps you take? How do you follow up? And then we can move to Rachel. Rachel, maybe then you can talk a little bit about your role as an associate dean, and if any, what role you play in the process, and how faculty can work with you when these kinds of things happen. And then Amy, you can talk about that, official process that happens with your office. How does that sound?
Sure.
Okay, so Melody, let's start with you.
Are you able to pull up my syllabus?
I have it right here. Let me share my screen.
If you could go to the original use policy section, it's towards the top, that would be great. So I'm just going to speak about plagiarism. As I said before, that's been the main issue more
Can
than
you see it now?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's been the main issue more than any other thing in my class. So as I said before, when students do their papers, they run it through turnitin.com, but other exams, they don't. So I just want to emphasize for all of you who are listening today, I really appreciate that, by the way, but I need you to keep in mind that this is my policy and it works for me. So I want to make sure that you don't feel like I'm trying to tell you that you need to do this because it works for me. It doesn't mean that it's going to work for everybody else. So you can see there for their paper, their American Revolution paper, they get to rewrite it if they're found responsible for scholastic dishonesty. And that's part of why I have no problem turning in anybody that seems suspicious, any paper that seems suspicious. So after it gets run through turnitin.com, I look at the different percentages, but even if it's smaller percent, if it's something that hasn't been cited, but there are other citations throughout, and I think, oh, maybe that person just missed that one, or maybe they think the citation applies to one before. That I feel like is something that can be corrected between me and the student. But if there's a lot of patchwork going on, or if there are chunks, long paragraphs that have been taken from someone else, I file this student incident report. And when I do that, I make sure I submit the original document that turnitin.com has processed so that they can see the percentage. I also go online to make sure that I can find the document matches so that when I turn it into Amy, the website on which the original wording was found is there as well. I turn in my syllabus, and I turn in the directions. I feel like there's something else, but maybe I'll come back to that. And then, so by the time it goes to Amy, I'm pretty sure that the student is, the student has not cited everything properly. I try not to judge, but by that point, to me, it's pretty obvious that the student has not cited or given credit to the sources that they were supposed to. And then from there, it just goes to her, and I wait it out. And if students ask me, or students come and tell me their sad story, I tell them that I filed the student incident report, and once I hear back from Dean Throop, then we can talk about it again. So do you want me to talk about what happens after I hear back, or should I wait until they talk about the rest of the process?
I don't know. Let's go through it in chronological order.
Okay. So and then at that point, I just wait to hear back.
Okay. So before we move to Rachel, I'm wondering, Melody, do you tell your students when you've turned something over to Amy?
I don't, because she's really quick, and they'll see her email usually before they see mine.
Okay.
But I do tell them. So like for the American Revolution paper, I posted the grades, and after I don't post the grade for the person who I submitted the report for, but I posted the class's grades, and I send an email saying, these are the things that went well, these are the things that could be improved in general. And then I say, if you don't have a score, it's because either you didn't do part of the assignment that I'm still waiting for you to do, or that your paper has been turned in. Your paper has, turnin.com has flagged your paper with for concern, and the Dean of Students office is looking into it. So they know, but by that point, they know that something's coming if they don't have a score.
Okay. So then the next step, Rachel, I'm not sure when you might come in as associate dean. Should we go to Amy next? And then
well, I just want to reiterate a couple of things just for clarity's sake. As soon as you turn something into Amy or the Dean of Students office, please, 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 and I cannot stress this enough, please, please, please make sure you have not entered any grades for that assignment in Canvas. Please, 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 please make sure you have not submitted any comments on those assignments in Canvas. So just make sure that when those assignments are sitting in Canvas, if it's an assignment that's been turned in through Canvas or submitted through Canvas, please make sure it is blank, it is clean, it is pristine, like you have never touched it, you have never looked at it, right? So just imagine that it's just has not been looked at in any way while it's being adjudicated through the Dean of Students process, right? Check with your associate dean about whether or not they want you to notify them when you submit things to the Dean of Students office. It varies by office. Our office does, some of the faculty in our campus notify us when they submit things to Dean of Students, some don't. We have a really good relationship with our counselors at Allen ISD, and so we kind of have a communication process where we let them know sometimes when people have been submitted to the Dean of Students office. It's kind of touchy with a lot of the dual credit students. It makes a difference sometimes with dual credit students when they've been I don't know, turned in, so to speak. But just touch base with your associate dean about whether or not they want you to let them know. Some do, some don't. So that's not a blanket, notify your associate dean when you've turned somebody in. Some of the associate deans are like, why are you telling me this? Some of them are like, thank you for letting me know. But my big thing is at that point, please just, if you've been grading and been adding comments or filling out a rubric, go through and delete them. When I was teaching, what I would do, I would open a Word document and I would put that student's name on it, because if I'd spend an hour writing comments and then realize the paper was plagiarized, I didn't want to lose all of the work that I had done. So I created a Word document, saved it with the student's name, so I didn't lose all of that, but I couldn't leave it in there, while everything was being done. So anyway.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely right. So I want to, before I go into the disciplinary process and what that looks like, I want to touch on one thing that Melody said a few minutes ago. She mentioned that her policy is her policy and that works for her. And that is a fantastic statement. We are all different. Our tolerances for various types of behavior, various things, the things that we need to do in our classes, and the parameters that we need to put in place for students are different for all of us. So what works for Melody or what works for Rachel or what works for me may not work for you. And that is not a bad thing. That's okay. but it's really important for you all as faculty to recognize what your limitations and what your expectations for students are, so that when you are creating your assignments and when you're building your parameters in your course syllabi, that you can make sure that those are things that you are going to and you are willing and able to uphold and stick to. So just be aware of that. So what happens is once Melody submits the incident report, they all come into our generic Dean of Students office email account. We are a district-wide office. So although I am at the technical campus and Megan's over at McKinney and Carrie's at Plano and we've got other staff members at the other campuses, that doesn't mean that I'm going to take all the technical campus cases. So it's really important for you all to realize that although we have a staff member assigned to a particular campus, we take cases from all over the district. So I may not be taking all of Melody's cases, Carrie may take some of hers, and so on. But we all go through the same exact process. And what I want you to take away from this is that it is a process. We believe in giving students a lot of due process at this institution. So even if I get a paper from Melody that appears to be 100% copy and pasted from Wikipedia, we keep in mind that until we go through our process and we make a determination and
It's like I was kicked out. This is so bizarre.
It's an allegation. And so we do not make any decisions until we go through our process. So once we get that incident report, it is assigned to a staff member, and we try to assign those within the same business day. But as you all can imagine, especially at midterms and at the end of the semester, we get super busy. So it may be a day or two before those incident reports get assigned. But what we all do once we are assigned an incident report is we immediately respond to the reporting party, whether that's a faculty member or a staff member or even another student, and confirm that we received the incident report. For those scholastic dishonesty cases, you're going to get pretty much a pat email from our office saying, we've received the report. Thank you for submitting it. Do not grade or return the assignment. And if we're at the end of the semester, do not issue a final course grade. So when we get to the end of the semester, it's extremely important that when you're grading, you leave the final course grade for those students blank. I know that gets to be hairy, especially for our our dual credit students at the end of the semester. But what our office does is we keep a running list of students whose final grades are being withheld pending resolution of a disciplinary matter. And we send that to the special admissions coordinators, the college and career counselors have access to it. Pretty much everyone in the dual credit program, which I can't say apparently, has access to it. And then the registrars and admissions office staff have access to that as well. So they all know if a case is going on and if that grade is being withheld. There should not be any surprises. So anyways, it's really important that you leave those final course grades blank. If you have graded the assignment, or if you have graded the student in the course at the end of the semester, we cannot adjudicate that case. It is considered at that point to have been self-adjudicated by the faculty member, and we will not go back and look at it again. So that grading issue that we've all touched on is really, really important. If you have questions, if you have concerns, reach out to your associate dean, reach out to our office, and we'll be happy to walk you through it and answer any questions that you have. But that grading matter is really, really big for our office. So once we get the incident report, we get all the case documentation, we've notified you that we've received everything, we're going to review everything. So we go through just like Melody does. We go through that turnitin.com report, we go through the paper, we look to see what we think is going on, if we can find other sources out on the internet or in the library's databases. And we typically go through and we highlight the portions of the assignment that we feel are concerning, in addition to what the professor has already pointed out. Once we do that, we actually send the student what is called a notification letter. That notification letter tells the student, we received an incident report, here's the allegation, here's who submitted it, and here's the student code of conduct violation that is being alleged. And then it instructs them to schedule an appointment with our office. Once they schedule the appointment, it's called the notification conference. They are allowed to bring a parent, a friend, another family member, even an attorney to that meeting. During that meeting, the whole point is to go over all the information and documentation that we have received, and then give the student a chance to respond in full to the allegations and to provide any additional evidence or documentation that they want us to have. Once we have done that, very often we can make a decision in scholastic dishonesty cases the same day. But if not, if there is additional information that we need to follow up on, if the student provides us with additional evidence or documentation that we need to review, we will do that before we make a decision. So when we get to that administrative decision, again, we are going to use the preponderance of the evidence standard to determine whether or not the student violated the code of conduct. If they did not violate the code of conduct, then great. We got to meet the student. We got to spend some time talking to them and learning about them. We'll find them not responsible, close out the case. And then at that point, we will send everything back to you, notify you the case is closed, and that at that point, you should grade the assignment pretty much as if none of that happened. So at that point, you just grade the assignment according to the rubric. If we do find the student responsible, then we're going to apply an appropriate penalty. Our penalties can range from a reprimand. I'll get those questions in a second, Rachel. I suspect I know what happened, but I'll get those in a second. So the penalties can range from a reprimand to conditional probation, which can last for 1, 2, or 3 calendar years, to a suspension, anywhere from 1 semester suspension up to 4 years, or an expulsion. Now, I will tell you that suspensions and expulsions are very, very rare in our office. We tend to reserve those for things that are not related to scholastic dishonesty, or more serious things like assaults, thefts, weapons violations. However, we have had some students who have worked themselves up to a suspension or an expulsion because they've gone through the process and committed scholastic dishonesty enough times that we finally went, yeah, no, this is, continuing to happen. We've had multiple conversations with you. You know the rules. You're continuing to engage in these behaviors, and this is absolutely unacceptable. So it can happen, but it's very rare. Typically, for a first-time case of scholastic dishonesty, we're going to use either a reprimand, which is a written warning, and that would be our most educational of the penalties, or conditional probation. We're going to look at all the factors about how, what the professor submitted, how serious the plagiarism was. It's in our office, it's very different if a student has a beautifully written paper and 1 or 2 sentences are not quoted or cited correctly, or they're missing an in-text citation in 1 paragraph or 1 area of the paper, versus the student who has blatantly copied and pasted from Wikipedia. So we're going to look at those a little bit differently and deal with those students a little bit differently. But essentially, once we get through that process, if the student is found responsible and given a penalty, then at that point, they actually have several options. Our decision is never final in our office when we find a student responsible for a violation of the code of conduct. If they disagree with our decision, they do have the right to appeal. And in all cases for penalties that go up through a suspension, the student has the right to 2 levels of appeal. And then for expulsion cases, the student has the right to 3 levels of appeal, with the final level being Dr. Matkin, and ultimately he has to approve all expulsions. They can accept our decision, or there's a deadline on the decision paperwork. And if they just let that pass, then at that point, it's like accepting our decision by default. So again, this is a process. This is not something where I get paperwork from a faculty member, and just because the faculty member says the student plagiarized or cheated on the exam, we go, yes, they did, and check it off, and everybody goes on. This process can take sometimes quite a long time to get through. In fact, I currently have some open cases right now that we started back in September, and they are still not done. So it takes a lot of patience from all of us. But I do ask, if you have any questions, if you have, submitted an incident report and you haven't heard from our office, please reach out and let us know. So as far as assigning a penalty to the paper or the assignment, once we get through our process, if the student is found responsible and that decision is upheld, at that point, we are going to send it back to you to issue what is called a scholastic penalty. That scholastic penalty is entirely up to you, and that's part of what needs to be out in your syllabus. And if you looked at Melody's syllabus, she does have some information out there about what she'll do. That penalty in the board policy, it states it can range from a 0 on the assignment to failing the course. So again, that's up to you. And I'm sure Rachel can chime in a little bit more on that in just a second, but you need to do what you are comfortable with and what is appropriate given the types of material you are teaching and the types of assignments you are giving the students. There is no pat for, every assignment it's a 0, or you must allow the student to rewrite it. It's completely up to you and what you're comfortable with.
I would always encourage you to not solely rely on the part about scholastic dishonesty, that's the institutional element down at the very bottom of the syllabus. I would encourage you to include something higher up in the syllabus where you're actually talking about the different assignments that you have, and include a statement about scholastic dishonesty up towards the top of the syllabus where students might actually read it. I think that it could also help kind of tamp down on some complaints if it's something that you have included, if it's something that's your own, rather than just rely on the institutional policies. And again, you have academic freedom to say, look, I'm going to let you, like what Melody's saying, I'm going to let you redo this type of assignment, but not redo this type of assignment. Or I'm going to give you a 0 on all of it. Or if it's a final research paper that's 30% or 40% of your course grade, if you fail it, it's going to be hard to pass the class if you get a 0 on a paper you've been working on for 12 out of the 16 weeks. And I've asked you 5 times to do your own work, and you not only plagiarized, but you cheated on it also, and you're going to get a 0. Then that's natural consequences. But that's up to you. I would make sure that you can clearly articulate to a student why you have chosen the penalty that you have chosen. Because when they do complain, and you will have students who complain, when they do, you're going to have to be able to explain why. And that's the hardest part, is being able to say why. And if you want to be able to say, well, this I'm going off of what the college has chosen, and I'm just re-articulating the college's policies. I'm just putting it here next to our assignments instead of just leaving it down at the bottom. That's absolutely fine, right? This is just a reiteration of the college's policies. Absolutely fine. It was too important. I didn't want to leave it all the way down at the bottom of the syllabus, right? To me, it seems wasted down there at the bottom that nobody's ever going to look at it. If you want to, whatever you want, just make sure you can explain why. Your associate dean will stand behind you, right? But if it's not there, if a policy is not there, we can't support it. And that's the other thing that becomes really important. If something is not articulated in the syllabus, if a particular policy is not spelled out in the syllabus, we can't support it. Like Melody's, you can rewrite a paper if you're found liable or responsible for plagiarism. You can rewrite this paper, but not that paper. That's a very nuanced policy, right? If somebody takes Melody's class, but then takes one of a history class on our campus from somebody else and is found responsible for plagiarism, and a student says, well, last semester I got to rewrite my paper, this semester the professor is not letting me, right? I'm going to say, well, that's not in this person's syllabus. It was in Dr. Miyamoto Walters' syllabus, but it's not in this one, If it's not in your syllabus, I can't support it. If it is in the syllabus, I can. So whatever policy you guys want, just make sure it's articulated.
And for me, that's done very intentionally because I turn everybody in. I also want it to be a learning experience for them. So for their essay, it's due about the middle of the semester. They have time to rewrite it. And oftentimes I think for them, having to redo the paper is more of a punishment than getting an F on it. And so, and then they learn something from it too. A lot of times, if you just fail it, it's just done, you move on. But if you have to rewrite it for some points, I'm hoping that you'll learn a little more from it. The syllabus policy for the college, I believe, says ranges from a 0 in the assignment to an F in the class. And that's so vague that I think as professors, it helps to be a little more specific. But with that said, I feel like it's really important to leave some wiggle room. I'm on the Discipline Appeals Committee, so we hear the students who don't accept Amy's policies. We hear the next level complaints. And there are some professors who have it in their syllabus where if you're found responsible for scholastic dishonesty, you fail the whole class. And for me, if you have been found responsible for plagiarism, and you have 3 sentences in 1 paragraph that you should have cited, but you didn't, I don't feel like you should fail my whole class. It's history. I mean, I love it. I'm hoping that my students do, but realistically, nobody's going to die. It's not like a nursing class where somebody might actually die if they don't know the material. And so that's why they get to redo their essay. Now, they don't get to redo their exams because that wouldn't be fair to the other people who don't get to redo their exams. All of my students get to rewrite their papers. Just, with the plagiarism, you start all over. And for the final exam, you don't get to redo that one either because there's no time at the end of the semester. And again, my policy says you'll be graded on the part that you actually did do on your own. And so if you turn in your final essay or your final exam, and you just have a small percentage that's been copied from somebody else, I do think you need to be penalized for it. But I don't necessarily think that means for your other answers that were great, you should be punished for that too. A lot of times I regret that policy. A lot of times I wish that they did have to fail the whole thing because they didn't learn anything from it. But I'm hoping that there are enough that my class, it's a 1301 right now. It's the introductory class. It's the first college class that a lot of these people are taking. I'm hoping that they'll use it as a stepping stone, a learning point. And I emphasize that not everybody's policy is as lenient as this. The goal is that if you make the mistake, you make it in my class so that by the time you get to the next class where they might have stronger penalties, you won't do it. You'll have learned from it. So like I said, I know that the policy isn't going to work for everyone. I don't know that it even worked for all of my students, but that's what we've been going with. And that's why Amy knows me really well because she gets maybe 5 a semester at least. I just turned in 3 this week.
So Amy, you mentioned this preponderance of evidence process for making the decision. And I'm wondering, could you maybe provide an example of what 50% plus might look like for you all? Does that make sense?
I have actually a really good one that I just dealt with this morning. It's not at all a scholastic dishonesty case, but it illustrates the point very, very well. So I had a female student over at Farmersville submit an incident report a couple weeks ago stating that a couple male students in her class had used the N-word during class, during a conversation. So I go through the whole investigation with them, met with the 2 of them, and both of them said we were discussing what was the topic in our music class. And the music for the class that they were discussing was based in the 1960s. And so that word was used a lot, unfortunately. Both of them said we never said the word. We did have the conversation. They both admitted to that. We're sorry she overheard it. Sorry she was upset by the conversation, but we never used the actual word. So in that case, I actually ended up finding them not responsible for the allegations of she submitted them for a disruption and creating an intimidating environment. Although she was upset by it, the information that they provided and the context they provided on their conversation did not give me that 50% plus a feather to say they had violated the code of conduct. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So
Thank
when we're
you.
looking at scholastic dishonesty specifically, we're really looking at, let's take plagiarism, for example. We're looking at, do they meet the 3 elements of citation? Do they have a works cited, bibliography, references, whatever page that lists all of the sources they used? Do they have the correct in-text citations, whether those are footnotes or parenthetical throughout the paper where they need them? Do they have quotation marks around those direct quotes that are typically 3 or more words taken from the source? And so if they don't meet those 3 elements, then we're typically going to find them responsible for scholastic dishonesty.
Thank you so much. So that kind of the story from beginning to end, I found really helpful. Is there anything else that you feel like faculty need to know or to think about while they're going through this process, or if they think they need to submit a student with an incident report? What else haven't we talked about yet that you feel is really important?
I do have one comment. There has typically been a misperception at this institution that faculty cannot talk to their students while the disciplinary process is going on, particularly for scholastic dishonesty cases. That is not at all the case. In fact, we do encourage you to talk with your students. Even after they come to meet with us, a lot of times students will have questions for the faculty member about the actual assignment or about the grading process and what that might look like if they're found responsible. So I encourage you to communicate with your students. Now, what we don't want is for you to say, okay, since we've talked, I'm going to go ahead and give you a 50 on this assignment. Let's not make any, major decisions, particularly about grades, until we get through the disciplinary process. But you can even give them a hypothetical. Pull up the grading, grading list that you've already got for the semester, and do some calculations. Talk to the student and say, okay, so here's my policy. If you're found responsible for plagiarism, my policy is that you get a 0 on this assignment. If that's the case, here's how that averages in with all the rest of your grades. And here's how, you would need to perform for the rest of the semester to get the grade you want or to pass the class or whatever. You can give them those hypotheticals. You can answer their questions. Just don't go ahead and grade anything until, like we've already talked about, the case is done. But you can absolutely communicate with your students, and we encourage you to do so while the process is going on.
That is really important. That's a really important misperception to shatter for us. What else? Anything else from you, Rachel or Melody, that you want to add?
My biggest thing is that if you suspect that you have students who have cheated or have plagiarized or whatever, just submit it. Right. That's what Dean of Students do for. I've been at several institutions in my life in academia, and Colin is by far the most supportive of this process. And Colin absolutely wants this to be a learning opportunity for the students to make sure they learn what not to do going forward. So please submit things, turn in the assignment, turn in what led you to think that they committed academic dishonesty, turn in the syllabus, turn in all that documentation. Let Amy sort it out. Let Amy be the bad guy. Let them hate on Amy, not hate on you. Don't handle it on your own. Don't decide that you're going to figure out who did wrong. Like if you think that 2 students cheated off each other or wrote papers together, don't decide you're going to be like, Matlock here and, figure it out. That's not your job. That's Amy's job. Please don't grade it on your own. Please don't do any of that on your own. You're going to create a mess that is going to be ridiculously difficult for us to untangle and can lead to some really bad consequences for all of us. So just don't go down that road. Just don't grade anything, send it off to Amy, let Amy handle it, or whoever your Amy is on different campuses. And then we'll go from there. And it can be a really good learning experience for the students. I've over the years had a lot of students who told me afterwards, I had no idea that I was doing this wrong. And they were appreciative, not of the zero, but of the the citation exercises that they learned from Dean of Students, and for being told about this in a fairly non-consequential way before they went to a 4-year and ended up getting kicked out of school or things like that.
So my last thought is that I think most of us, I'm going to go with all of us try to set our students up for success, not for failure. So if they have the information, or if they don't know, I think we should tell them at some point. But once we tell them, once they're supposed to know, then it's on them. So I feel like we have some responsibility to set them up. But after that, it's their own free will. This is college, they're grown-ups, whether or not they're in dual credit, they're grown-ups. They need to understand that there are consequences for actions, and that's part of what this is.
Absolutely. So we have a few minutes left. If any attendees have any questions that they'd like to pose to our panelists, here's your chance. What questions do you have? You know, we got one of them answered during the session itself, so way to go, Amy.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, Kimberly, go ahead.
And I came in about 6 minutes late, so maybe I missed it, so forgive me. Do y'all have like workshops and stuff for students on plagiarism? Because I find that, they come in and they don't know how to do anything. They don't know how to cite stuff. They don't know how to, it's a lot. It's a lot to kind of start out with for their first year. And I was just wondering if there was something that they could take prior to being reported. You know what I mean? Like some resource we could have and say, hey, there's this being offered or something.
So in my classes, I require them to use Chicago Manual of Style. It's the style guide for historians, and they hate it. People complain about it all the time. Why do we need to learn this? We've never learned this before. And my whole thing is you're in college to learn things that you haven't learned before. That is part of why you learned this before. So we go over that in class, and I tell them, if you don't use Chicago, you're not writing a proper history paper, but to have MLA or APA citations is better to have no citations. Because one is a plagiarized paper and what, I'm sorry, I didn't catch what you said.
I said I require mine to use APA.
Okay, so using the wrong type of citation is still better than using no citations. Yeah. And so we go over that in class, but I also offer a workshop through the Writing Center on citations, particularly Chicago, but I know that the Writing Center has different kinds of citation workshops, but I don't know of any on plagiarism. So I'll let Amy finish the question.
They do. The Writing Center and the Centers for Academic Assistance do a lot on plagiarism. They do a lot on how to avoid scholastic dishonesty. They do a lot on different styles of citation. So I'd encourage you to catch up with your Writing Center or Center for Academic Assistance manager at your campus and find out what they're offering. We also on our Dean of Students office, actually I take that back, it's on our student conduct webpage. We have a video that student conduct officer Joe Guy, who is also one of our English faculty members, he put together an entire presentation and a video on exactly this topic, on how to cite information correctly. We actually have 3 videos out there that he did on cheating, collusion, and plagiarism and how to avoid all those things. And then there are little quizzes that they can look at after the videos as well. They certainly don't have to answer them, but they can if they want to. But those videos are very helpful. We also have what is called our plagiarism and citation guide. Again, that's a document that Joe started and he and I have worked on together over the years, and maybe a little biased, but we think it's pretty good and very helpful for the students. Not only does it have examples of the 3 styles of citation that we use most often here at Collin, but it has lists of on-campus and online or off-campus resources for the students. And Joe got permission from one of his former students to use portions of a paper that she had written very beautifully. And then she had originally written it in MLA style. So he put it in the example in there in MLA style, and then he converted that same exact text into APA and Chicago Manual style as well. So that document is out there. It's available. It's completely free. I know I have professors like Melody who ask for that one every year. And I have other professors who link to it in their Canvas shells. So feel free to do that as well.
So Amy, that citation and plagiarism guide is great. And I'm teaching an online class right now even, and in my discussion board assignments, citation is a big thing. They don't have to use outside sources. They just are supposed to use the stuff they're reading in the book. But if they do, I say it has to be properly cited. And I have that as an attached document or a link in every single discussion board assignment and saying, hey, if you don't know how to use citations, it's right here. And I have it in the Start Here module for the course too. If you don't know how to use citations, the document is right here. I think I also have like 4 pages about citations and plagiarism in the Start Here module for that course, because I don't want to turn people in. I think one semester I turned in like 12 assignments in my online class from discussion boards because people were just being lazy, and it's an online class and they were just going to whatever page they could find about, 200-word thing about federalism, and I'm just gonna copy it. And so it becomes what resources can you provide the students that they can readily access to be able to help them figure out what they need to do for citations. And that PDF document that you guys have about citations where it's all written out for them is fantastic. And it's easy to drop in. Yeah, it's easy to drop in anywhere you need in Canvas.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that is a true wealth of resources, it sounds like, that are available to our students. That's incredible. Anything else? Any other questions with our last couple of minutes here? Okay, well, this session has been recorded. I will post a link to the recording on the CTL website. It'll probably be tomorrow or Friday. But if you want to revisit anything that our panelists discussed today, you will have that opportunity. And I just want to say thank you again to Rachel, Melody, and Amy. This was truly an incredibly helpful session, I think. For me, for sure, to learn about all of the steps in the process and all the resources that are available. And I know it was helpful to our faculty attendees as well. So thank you so much for your time and your expertise today. This is really great.
Thank you for having us. This was fun.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for being here. Happy Wednesday. We are officially through the halfway point of the week. And hope to see some of you again at some additional CTL sessions. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.